There was always a deep down want and need to do something for myself, to grow, to become something, to be the best that I could be. However, it doesn't matter right now. We just need to think about what happened at the very beginning. All the way back at a car show in 2019, where little me had been taken, with my dad, just by accident, a friend of my parents won a voucher booklet from a raffle, which contained a 2-hour span of time from a VR cafe in the city. And in that small room, concealed by a fabric sheet and a few sheets of plywood that smelled lightly of disinfectant, my journey had begun, and an obsession was born. After numbers of hours playing and paying that VR cafe, me and my parents caved, and we picked up my first ever VR headset, the Oculus Quest 1. We got it secondhand off of a guy in an IKEA parking lot on Halloween 2020. And from there on out, for a couple of months, I'd eventually ended up playing many single-player and multiplayer games, such as Super Hot, Job Simulator, Blobby Tennis, amazing game by the way, Rec Room Paintball and those little funny dungeon crawl things, Arizona Sunshine, Space Pirate Trainer, and Echo Arena VR, rest in peace. And I was content. I was also playing a lot of Beat Saber for a large period of time, in which allowed for me to become very confident in VR as I maxed out a number of different songs such as Crystallized and Ghost, so I was feeling really good about myself. However, I'd always wanted to try a true multiplayer VR shooter, but not anything like Pavlov or Contractors, as they seemed too slow and repetitive to me at the time. And it was until one faithful winter day when I discovered what was at the time described as John Wick VR by some of the community, that game being my first Gun Raiders VR. On April 21st of 2021, I had joined the game through the early stages of App Lab, starting with a relatively bare first impression, honestly. However, I had loved the weapons, uniqueness, and the sounds of the game, so I had stuck with it. I watched the game as it metamorphosed through stages of basic simplicity and grace, rest in peace Box Hub, you will forever be missed, into a thriving paradise for squeakers, resting in their original habitat, the original hub, modern-day Skytrain, where I began to stand out. I would run around with a grenade launcher, shutting any screaming infant I saw up with a frag to the face. However, I always knew there was a bigger fish. Always, every here and there, an insanely good player, in my eyes, would show up and steamroll everyone, me included. From there, I concluded that there must be a better and more complex way to play. Something that would make me stand aside from the rest of the Hub Kid competition. However, I had no interest in progressing further until a certain weapon was added, one of mass destruction and extreme dopamine rushes. The day was September 15th, 2021. The Katana was added to the game with a high speed boost and extremely high damage output, as well as some pretty funny sounds and flashy effects, which my pre-developed brain still loves and loved to this day. However, the weapon was, in retrospect, extremely broken, and because of that, I had begun to absolutely ransack, decimate, and run over the squeakers living in the hubs. So I had finally taken my first steps into proper games. Commonly Station, Yard, and Club, the original trio of maps in the game. I grew and grew as I watched players play alongside me and working alongside them this whole time, slowly developing and growing with every game until I had eventually become equals with the good players in those games. However, the rule of the bigger fish always stands, and I had eventually encountered a few of these players dominating lobbies and just destroying me due to my underdeveloped skills and low experience. I was not fine with this, all due to the large inflated egos which seemed to be fueling their growth. However, I still thought I could do all this with a pointy stick and topple their foundations. I got close in a few occasions, however, ended up never being able to do it. So I settled into playing normal lobbies and running over common players and avoiding the best of the best. This entire ideology had held me in mediocrity until one singular game featuring some of the best of all time. I still can't remember the day to the exact number, but I approximate it to be from around late September, early October of 2021. It was a yard free-for-all, featuring some of the best of all time, Hellraiser, I Punch a You-Face, Toasty Oven, Ball, Ian, Pop-Tarts, Puglord, Argonaut, and Mr. Hack, each of these players amazing in their own right, completely annihilated me. This being one of the only games I believe I have ever placed flat last in. However, I, during this entire game, had heard them murmuring about some tournament, some competitive experience I had never thought of. However, I knew I wasn't good enough, and after that royal defeat of a century, I decided to myself that the very reason I was there was to defeat each and every one of them, if it was the last thing I did in that game, and so I began to improve. I, over the next couple of months, had developed my style from a katana player to a movement style sniper, after the katana had been heavily nerfed and taken out of the meta of the game. So I took what I had, which is a movement, and tried the closest thing, which was a sniper with a bit of movement mixed in. This upward growth continued the entire time, throughout the next couple of months, my mind still being locked onto the idea of becoming one of the best of all time, and beating those who had demolished me in that 1-yard match. Eventually, a player by the name Mr. Hack had planted the seed of competitive aspirations. I had been playing for quite some time then and become a pretty solid player in my opinion, which is supported by Hack's question of him wondering if I'd want to join his team and try competitive play in the 5v5 Phoenix Cup tourney by VREL. I, however, didn't go with this proposition, and later in February decided to make my first moves into the Gun Raiders Discord and see what comp had in store. Enter Saboteur Monkeys. February 11th, I joined the Discord and eventually applied to join a team that was started and by the name of Saboteur Monkeys, which at the time was run by 4 players: COD HD, iBeats, 2 German dudes who started it all, Polar Kill, the semi-lead of the team and overall amazing guy, and Grim Dealer Alpha, another awesome guy which was always looking for some improvement. I'd gotten a tryout that next day against Polar Kill and done apparently well enough to join and got in as a 5th player of Sabs. This started my want and need to continue growing, to prove that I fit. I was able to belong in this competitive setting and grow past my limitations. Not soon after, we would be put into our first tournament, and we did okay-ish. We defeated Team Frenchie, which was obviously a French team, new to Gun Raiders. However, we went to fight against Most Wanted Mercenaries, which was comprised of Toasty Oven, Stoom, Argonaut, and Dominus Glitch, which absolutely whooped us, to be honest. However, it started to give me an understanding of the mental needs of these competitions, as I was heavily impacted by the game, and at a couple points was hurting in my heart due to the amount of stress I put onto myself, and made me perform poorly. However, I knew I could do better, so I began to work and grind to become a better player and icon for the community. I wanted to do better. I wanted to be the best. There was nothing that was going to stop that. I had upgraded from the Quest 1 to the Quest 2. Taking off the training weights, I felt unstoppable. The latency was greatly improved and my speed was much faster than before, allowing myself to react faster, shoot faster, flick faster, overall become a much better player off of one individual hardware upgrade. I felt like I couldn't be stopped. I was finally able to unleash my complete strength. However, I wasn't going to put it to waste, as the new GRPL League, the first of its kind, was announced. This new headset allowed for me to be able to make it up higher and work alongside some of the best in the game, such as Hellraiser and Mr. Hack. However, during the very beginning of the season, when we were still looking to fill our final spot on the roster, a new player showed up, Cerberus. He seemed to be a new player with amazing power, which we had 1v1'd, and when we had 1v1'd, it would always be a very close game. Sometimes going to him, sometimes going to me. And so, despite his inability to speak, I added him onto the team, with me, Crosstails, Psycho Ghoul, Ritas, K-Sims, and the Spinsman for GRPL. However, after a month, people had gotten suspicious and dug deep to discover that Cerberus had apparently been an alternate account for Mr. Hack in disguise. Instead of only playing for one team on Hellraiser's team, he had joined us on his alt, and with that, he was banned out of the league. Months later, after months and months of gameplay, the season had concluded of GRPL. We placed third, only being beat by Mercenaries and the Hellraisers team. We beat Effin' Raiders, which was a large upset for us, so we knew that we could do much more in the future. We just knew we had to work for it. After numerous months of improving and figuring out rosters, we had eventually found ourselves at the next league, Hellcat League Season 1, hosted by Hellcat, obviously. However, I knew I needed to win this one. For anyone that had left the toxic comp community, for Polar, for anyone else who had left along the way. And so, after months and months, our final roster was created. Kirbydog, Crosstails, Lord Redis, Psycho Ghoul, and K-Sims. All very strong individual players, however, with each of our individual strengths and understanding of the game, an amazing team. Some long range, some short range, amazing setups, and great coordination. That is the formula for Destiny. Our team had played for months and months, slowly working our way up the bracket, up the leaderboard, and eventually being number 1 in the league, seeded. 0 losses in our games, 100% win rate. We were doing the best that we could possibly do. And on December 17th of 2022, the grand finals had occurred. Me, Redis and Psycho, versus Hellraiser, Solo 32, and Gooberbot was the very grand finals of the Hellcat League. Goober was a new up-and-comer who had been taken in and trained to be one of the best players of all time. Solo also follows that legacy. However, Hellraiser, he had been there for the longest time out of them all. He had been the one that I first put the target on the back of on the Death Pit match. This game was my chance to prove that we have improved and become the best in the game. After a long game going to the final of 3 maps, after watching nearly everything slip away from our grasp in map 1 and 2, we had the perfect map selected, Skytrain. Redis and Psycho's jobs were simple. Hide up high in the sky, take picks on the ones that are respawning, while I made fast picks with shotgun ult, and it worked perfectly. With that final intense game, we had dethroned the monopolistic team of the game, and I was finally at rest. However, with that, my need to grow and improve was re-sparked. In an idea of conquest and growth, I had watched the Miami Vale Major livestream numerous times, analyzing playstyles and aim styles. However, I knew I can't do that yet, so I found and joined the next best thing, that being Breachers VR. In the beginning of winter, November and December 2022, Breachers was finally given to the public in a public alpha, of which I had taken the opportunity and gotten in on. I noticed many very strong players in my first couple days and seen many strong playstyles. However, I wanted to have a good base before starting competitive. However, after a couple of weeks playing the game, I had been talking to who was at the time the founder of One Crew Breachers, Lord. He and I had talked over an idea of mutual growth where sabs were connected and the players who wanted to play Breachers could try out freely for One Crew. One of those players had decided to finally join, that player being Mr. Tabs. However, after a while, our NA roster for One Crew was Cux, Baymask, Riston, Desi Fox, Kingsley, Ghost, Beastark, and Natdog. It made a solid roster. However, as things go, we had had disagreements with leadership considering Lord. And so with that, we had left One Crew and created our own team, creatively named Rebel. Rebel was a completely fresh team. However, we grabbed the 2 EU players One Crew had, and with that also made our EU team, Revolt, starting with Tabs and Caramels. However, despite most of us being new to VR esports in a standard form, we were able to be one of the top teams through the entire alpha, only being rivaled majorly by F3, who were, in my opinion, in one of their best forms of all time during the alpha. However, during this time, I doubted my own abilities, and therefore held myself back again, making the game much harder for me to deal with. Our roster grew even more through the alpha, adding on Listless and Nobro. Despite the occasional upsetting game or team setback, I continued on, in hopes of a LAN, as I was very much so still obsessed with the MVM, and watching their VODs to build on my knowledge, as well as hopes of what could be to come in the future. Rebel had held its strong title for many months, even into the preseason tourney of BCL, when we were knocked out by 404. However, with Breachers came nearly any large team or org that may have thought of, such as Wrecked, Vortex, 404, Havoc, One Crew, SKS, and Acer. And with that came high-quality scouters for teams, searching for new talent for the game. Early in the morning, in the middle of a science class, I'd got a notification. A DM from one of the many players I'd obsessively watched from the Miami Vale Major, that being Neuro from Wrecked. That DM to me is one of the most important that I've had in my life concerning VR esports. Unexpectedly, Wrecked had wanted me in on the team, to play alongside some of the VR giants that I had been idolizing and growing towards for months and months and months, such as Clev, Nadix, and Neuro. And so, after a while of debating whether to leave Rebel and join Wrecked, I'd come to the conclusion that this may be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And with that, I was officially part of one of the strongest virtual reality esports orgs in the scene. This, in retrospect, spelled the starts of a promising overall career, allowing me to grow alongside some of the best VR players out there. I was truly living my aspirations for which I had held for an extremely long time. Given an opportunity, only hoped and prayed by some. From there, my development as a player was purely to grow to fit with Wrecked better and better, to prove that I should be there, to show how good I really was. Every loss we had was deep cutting and real. However, it led to a much better self from me for not only Breachers, but any game I played competitively. Our teamwork, aim, and overall hours put in allowed for us to place third in the BCL. Yes, we need to improve. I take that as a challenge, and we must continue to work towards our goals and aspirations in further on leagues. Despite this revelation, our dreams hold true, and for me, that dream was my first shot at ValeComp. September 8th, 2023, Vale VR was finally released as a closed alpha on Quest 2, and with that, I was finally enabled to grow and cash in on those hours of MVM gameplay I'd watched and put it to practice. Me and another amazing Breachers Wrecked player, Akari, were originally added to the 8 Basils, the sister team to Wrecked for Vale VR, run by Blue 4. And this, for all of us, was a new opportunity, especially with rumors of another major LAN event in the future of Vale. However, eventually the Basils had assembled our roster for our first Crest League tournament, that being Blue 4, Vendetta, Akari, Mad Dog, Cleric, Naoko, and I. We played numerous scrims, slowly building up our skill, understanding how strong we truly were, beating teams such as Determined and Wrecked in scrims, as well as Vortex. Our beating of these powerhouse teams gave us an extremely strong confidence in ourselves, which we were able to take advantage of in the first November Crest League 5v5 tournament, beating out Boogie Woogie Bandits, Acer, and Wrecked to place us into the finals. However, we were unable to take enough points from Crimson Claw or Acer a second time to advance to top 1 or 2. However, our underdog story is not over yet, as we have only been playing for a matter of months, and much can change. Now, we need to continue moving, keep improving, and working with each other to become the best that we possibly can be.